While everyone is reacting to the Maiduguri explosion, almost nobody is asking why the present US president is suddenly inserting himself into Nigeria's internal crisis. A bomb goes off in northeastern Nigeria, and thousands of kilometers away, a powerful political voice in Washington responds almost immediately. It is a moment that feels both familiar and unusual. Familiar because Maiduguri has seen violence before. Unusual because this time the reaction is not just local, it is global, direct, and politically charged. Why now? Why Nigeria? Is this about security or something deeper? Global political positioning. And one question quietly hangs in the air. Is this really about the explosion, or is Nigeria becoming part of a much bigger political game? Before going deeper into this story, if you're new here, welcome to Naija Update 24/7, your daily source for breaking Nigerian news, political analysis, and the stories shaping the country. Subscribe now and stay informed. On March 16, 2026, the city of Maiduguri woke up to another moment of fear. The explosion, sudden and violent, carried the same pattern Nigerians in the northeast have come to recognize over the years. Confusion first, then panic, then the slow arrival of information, fragmented, uncertain, and emotionally heavy. Initial reports pointed toward insurgent activity. The region has long struggled with extremist violence, with groups operating in and around Borno State for more than a decade. For many residents, this was not just another headline. It was a painful reminder that the security crisis, though reduced in intensity in recent years, has not disappeared. What made this incident different was not only the attack itself, but the timing and the political environment surrounding it. At the time of the explosion, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was reportedly in the United Kingdom. Engagements, diplomatic meetings, and state matters were ongoing. From a governance standpoint, this is not unusual. Presidents travel, governments function beyond physical presence. But in politics, perception often moves faster than explanation. Within hours, reactions began to shape a narrative. Questions started emerging not just about the attack, but about leadership. Was the response fast enough? Was the coordination effective? Was the government fully in control? Then came the external voice. Donald Trump, a dominant figure in global politics, issued a strong statement criticizing Nigeria's leadership and framing the situation as a failure of security management. His words were direct, pointed, and impossible to ignore. It was no longer just a Nigerian story. It became an international political moment. But Trump's statement was not just criticism. It revealed something deeper about how global actors now view Nigeria's internal security. To understand the weight of this moment, it is important to look at how Nigeria's security system actually works. At the center of it is the presidency. The Nigerian president is not just a political leader, but also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. This role carries both symbolic and operational authority. Decisions about national security, military deployments, and strategic responses ultimately trace back to that office. Below the presidency sits a structured hierarchy: military leadership, intelligence agencies, and security institutions, all working within defined chains of command. In theory, this system is designed for coordination and rapid response. But Nigeria is also a federal system. States have governors, communities have local structures. Yet, when it comes to hard security, military action, intelligence operations, and counterinsurgency, the federal government holds most of the power. So, this creates a delicate balance. When things go right, the system appears strong and unified. But when things go wrong, responsibility quickly concentrates at the top. And that is where the Maiduguri explosion becomes politically sensitive. With the president outside the country at the time, even if governance continued through established channels, the optics raised questions. Who was directing operations in real time? How quickly were decisions made? Were there any delays in response? These are not just operational questions, they are political ones. Because in Nigeria, leadership is not judged only by action, but by presence. There are also deeper institutional pressure points. Intelligence gathering in conflict zones remains a challenge. Coordination between agencies can sometimes fall short, and in regions with complex terrain and long-standing insurgent networks, even the best systems face limitations. So, when an incident like this occurs, it exposes both the strengths and the gaps within the structure. And here lies a critical insight. Nigeria's security system is highly centralized. That means the perception of leadership, whether the president is seen as fully in control, can be just as powerful as the actual response on the ground. This is why external commentary, like Trump's statement, carries weight. It does not just criticize policy, it influences perception, and in politics, perception can shape reality. At a deeper level, this moment sits at the intersection of security, governance, and identity. Northern Nigeria, particularly the Northeast, has long been at the center of discussions around religion, marginalization, and state presence. Communities there are not just dealing with security threats, they are navigating questions of belonging, protection, and trust in government. Every attack reopens old wounds. Every response is measured not just in military terms, but in human terms. Did the government act fast enough? Did it care enough? Was the region given the attention it deserves? These are emotional questions, but they carry political consequences. And when a foreign political figure steps in with criticism, it adds another layer. It can reinforce local frustrations, or it can trigger defensive reactions within government circles. Either way, it changes the conversation.
Trump's involvement also reflects a broader global reality. Nigeria is not just any country. It is Africa's most populous nation, a major economic player, and a key partner in international security efforts. What happens in Nigeria does not stay in Nigeria. Global powers watch closely. Sometimes they support quietly. Sometimes they speak loudly. In this case, the choice to speak publicly and critically suggests that Nigeria's internal security is being viewed through a wider geopolitical lens. This is where the story becomes more complex. Is this about genuine concern for security? Or is it about shaping narratives, influencing perceptions, and positioning for broader global influence? There is no simple answer, but the timing raises questions. And in politics, timing is rarely accidental. Back at home, Nigerians are left to interpret the situation through multiple lenses. Some see the criticism as unfair, arguing that no country is immune to security challenges. Others see it as a wake-up call, a reminder that leadership must not only act, but also be seen to act decisively. There are also those who focus on the facts, that governance structures remain in place even when a president travels, that security operations are continuous, not dependent on physical presence alone, that one incident, however tragic, does not define an entire administration. These perspectives are important, because in moments like this, narratives can easily become distorted. And when narratives take over, facts can fade into the background. What remains clear is that the Maiduguri explosion has done more than highlight a security issue. It has exposed the fragile relationship between leadership, perception, and public trust. It has shown how quickly local events can become global conversations, and it has raised an important question about the future. Will this lead to stronger security coordination and clearer communication from leadership? Or will it become another political moment, debated, analyzed, and eventually absorbed into Nigeria's long history of complex governance challenges? For now, the answers are still unfolding. But one thing is certain. Nigeria is not just managing a security situation, it is managing a narrative, both at home and on the global stage. And in today's political world, that may be just as important. The story does not end with the explosion. It shifts, quietly but decisively, into the arena of power. Because in politics, Moments like this are never just about what happened. They are about who speaks, who stays silent, and who gains ground while others are forced to defend. The intervention by Donald Trump carries weight not because he currently holds office, but because of what he represents. His voice still resonates across global conservative networks, media spaces, and political circles that shape opinion far beyond the United States. When he speaks on a country like Nigeria, it is not treated as casual commentary. It is interpreted as a signal. And signals in politics are rarely neutral. For Trump, the motivation may not be limited to Nigeria itself. His political identity has long been tied to strong rhetoric on security, leadership strength, and national control. By stepping into Nigeria's situation, he reinforces that image, not just to Americans, but to a global audience that follows his brand of politics. It is also a way of positioning. International security has become a shared language among powerful nations. Terrorism, insurgency, and instability are no longer seen as local problems, they are global concerns. By commenting on Nigeria, Trump places himself within that conversation again, reasserting influence in a space where perception matters almost as much as policy. But while that plays out internationally, the impact inside Nigeria is immediate. For President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the challenge is not just the security situation, it is the narrative forming around it. Leadership in Nigeria operates on multiple levels. There is the practical side, deploying resources, coordinating agencies, managing crises. And then there is the symbolic side, projecting control, confidence, and presence. When criticism comes from within, it can be managed politically. It can be debated, countered, or reframed. But when it comes from outside, especially from a figure with global visibility, it becomes harder to contain. It shifts the conversation. Opposition figures within Nigeria understand this dynamic. They do not need to create new arguments. The external criticism amplifies existing ones. It gives weight to concerns about security, leadership responsiveness, and national direction. For them, it is an opportunity, not necessarily to attack directly, but to question, to ask whether the current approach is enough, to highlight gaps without appearing purely partisan. At the same time, critics of the government's security strategy find validation. For years, there have been debates about how to address insurgency, military force, intelligence reform, community engagement, economic intervention. Each has its supporters and its skeptics. Now, those debates return with renewed intensity. And in politics, timing is everything. On the other side, the federal government faces a different kind of pressure, not just to act, but to reassure, to demonstrate that control has not been lost, that systems are working, and that leadership remains firmly in charge, even across borders. Because if the narrative shifts too far in the opposite direction, the consequences can be long-lasting. Credibility, once questioned, takes time to rebuild. The regional dimension adds another layer. Northern Nigeria has always played a central role in the country's political balance. It is not just a geographical region, it is a political force with its own expectations, priorities, and sensitivities. Security in the north is not an abstract issue. It is immediate and personal. Communities have lived through years of instability. They measure leadership not just by statements, but by outcomes. In moments like this, they watch closely. Was the response swift? Was it coordinated? Was it visible? These questions are not always asked publicly, but they shape political sentiment. And political sentiment over time shapes alliances. Behind the visible actors, there are quieter influences at work. Military leadership, for example, operates largely outside public debate, but plays a critical role in shaping outcomes. Their assessments, strategies, and internal evaluations feed into decision-making at the highest level. Then there are political elites, figures who may not hold office now, but are already thinking ahead. Future elections,
shifting alliances, emerging opportunities. They observe moments like this carefully, not just for what they reveal today, but for what they might mean tomorrow. Because every crisis carries information. Who responds effectively? Who struggles? Who gains public confidence? Who loses it? These observations do not fade, they accumulate, and slowly they influence the direction of politics. Which leads to a question that remains open. Could this moment, this combination of a security incident and international criticism, reshape political alliances ahead of future elections? The answer is not immediate, but the possibility is real, and it is already being considered in quiet conversations across the country. But beyond politics, the real question is what this means for everyday Nigerians living under the threat of insecurity.
In Maiduguri and across the northeast, the impact is not theoretical, it is lived. The explosion is not just a headline, it is a disruption of normal life. It is families checking on loved ones, it is businesses closing early, it is communities once again adjusting to uncertainty. For many residents, there is a sense of familiarity that is difficult to explain, a recognition of patterns, the sound, the confusion, the aftermath. It creates a kind of fatigue, not just fear, but exhaustion, because each incident reopens the same concerns. Will it happen again? Is it getting better? Is anyone truly in control? At the national level, these local experiences translate into broader questions about governance. Security is one of the most fundamental responsibilities of any government. When it is challenged, everything else becomes harder to sustain. Economic activity depends on stability. Investors, both local and international, watch security trends closely. A single incident may not define a country, but repeated uncertainty can influence long-term decisions. Confidence, once shaken, does not return easily. There is also the issue of public trust. In modern politics, trust is shaped not only by what governments do, but by how their actions are perceived. Communication becomes as important as coordination. Clarity becomes as important as speed. When information is delayed or inconsistent, space opens up for speculation, and speculation often fills the gaps faster than facts. This creates a perception gap. The government may be acting, deploying resources, coordinating responses, but if the public does not see or understand those actions, the perception can move in a different direction. And that perception has consequences, because in today's political environment, perception of control can be just as damaging as actual insecurity. It affects how citizens feel. It affects how markets respond. It affects how the country is viewed from outside. And this is where the story stops being just Nigerian, it becomes international. Nigeria's position in the world makes it impossible to separate internal events from global reactions. As one of Africa's largest economies and most influential countries, Nigeria is deeply connected to international systems, security partnerships, trade relationships, diplomatic engagements. The United States is one of those key partners. Cooperation between both countries spans multiple areas, from counterterrorism to economic development. Information sharing, training programs, and strategic coordination have all been part of that relationship. So, when a figure like Donald Trump comments on Nigeria's security, it does more than create headlines. It sends a message to policymakers, to investors, to international observers. It frames Nigeria in a particular way, at least for a moment. And in global politics, framing matters. It can influence how decisions are made in distant capitals. It can shape discussions about partnerships, aid, and engagement. It can even affect how Nigerians abroad are perceived. The diaspora feels this impact directly. In the United Kingdom, the United States, and across Europe, Nigerians follow these developments closely. They are connected to home through family, culture, and identity. When stories like this emerge, they carry both concern and reflection. Concern for safety, reflection on how their country is being represented. For many, it becomes a conversation about image as much as reality. What does this say about Nigeria? How is it being portrayed? Is that portrayal fair? These are not simple questions, and they do not have simple answers, but they highlight an important truth. External criticism, especially from influential figures, often amplifies domestic political pressure more than internal opposition ever could, because it changes the scale of the conversation. It moves it from local debate to global scrutiny, and once that shift happens, the stakes become higher for everyone involved: government, opposition, citizens, and the country as a whole. The Maiduguri explosion, in that sense, is no longer just an isolated event. It is a moment of intersection where security, politics, and global perception meet. And from that intersection, the next phase of the story begins to take shape. As the noise begins to settle, a different layer of the story starts to emerge, one that is less visible but far more important, because in moments like this, what people believe can be just as powerful as what actually happened. One of the most common assumptions forming around the situation is simple and direct: that the absence of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at the time of the Maiduguri explosion automatically means a lack of control. It is an argument that feels intuitive. Leadership in the Nigerian context is often associated with physical presence. The idea of a president being far away during a national security incident creates a perception gap that is difficult to ignore. But governance does not function on presence alone. Modern state systems are designed to operate continuously regardless of location. Communication networks, intelligence channels, and command structures are built to ensure that decisions can be made in real time, even across continents. In practice, this means that a president does not need to be physically present to give directives, approve responses, or coordinate agencies. However, politics does not always follow technical logic. It follows perception, and perception is shaped by visibility. If the public does not see leadership actively responding through statements, appearances, or clear communication, doubt can begin to grow even if action is already taking place behind the scenes. This is where misunderstanding begins to take root, not because the system has failed completely, but because the connection between action and public awareness has weakened. At the same time, there is another perspective that complicates the narrative even further. The comments made by Donald Trump may not be driven purely by concern for Nigeria's internal situation. They may also be part of a broader political communication strategy, one that aligns with his long-standing approach to global issues. Trump's political style has always emphasized strong, direct messaging. By framing Nigeria's situation in terms of leadership failure, he reinforces a familiar narrative, one that resonates with his audience and strengthens his positioning on security matters. In that sense, the statement may say as much about global political messaging as it does about Nigeria itself. This distinction matters because if the reaction is interpreted only as an objective assessment, it can distort how the situation is understood locally. But if it is seen as political communication, then it becomes one piece of a much larger puzzle. The role of the media adds another dimension. In the immediate aftermath of any crisis, information moves quickly, but not always accurately. Headlines are designed to capture attention. Social media amplifies strong opinions. Complex realities are often reduced to simple narratives. A president is abroad, an explosion occurs, a foreign leader criticizes. It becomes a story that appears straightforward. But beneath that simplicity lies a network of institutional processes, security briefings, coordinated responses, intelligence analysis that are not always visible to the public. This gap between what is seen and what is happening creates tension, and in that tension, narratives compete. Some emphasize failure, others emphasize structure. Some focus on symbolism, others focus on systems. The truth, as is often the case in politics, lies somewhere in the middle. The situation is not as simple as complete control, nor is it as straightforward as total breakdown. It is complex. It reflects both the strengths and the limitations of Nigeria's governance and security framework, and it highlights a deeper reality, that in moments of crisis, clarity becomes one of the most valuable and most difficult resources.
Looking ahead, the story begins to shift from interpretation to possibility. What happens next will not be determined by a single event, but by a series of decisions, some visible, others unfolding quietly within institutions. One possible path is a stronger, more coordinated federal response. This would involve not just immediate security measures, but a deliberate effort to restore confidence. Increased military presence, improved intelligence operations, and clearer communication from leadership could signal control and stability. Such a response would aim to close the perception gap to align what is happening on the ground with what the public understands. But this path requires precision. Too little action may reinforce doubts. Too much visible force without a clear strategy may raise new concerns. Another scenario is political. Opposition figures may begin to frame the incident as part of a broader pattern, linking it to existing concerns about security and governance. They may not need to create new arguments. They only need to connect the dots in a way that resonates with public sentiment. If that narrative gains traction, it could shape political conversations in the months ahead, not necessarily through direct confrontation, but through gradual influence. A third possibility lies beyond Nigeria's borders. Increased international attention on Nigeria's security situation could lead to deeper scrutiny. Foreign governments, policy analysts, and global institutions may begin to ask more questions, not just about this incident, but about long-term stability. This does not automatically lead to negative outcomes. It can also open doors for stronger cooperation, more support, and renewed engagement. But it raises the stakes, because once a country becomes the focus of sustained global attention, every development is watched more closely, and every response is measured more carefully. There are signals that may indicate which direction the story is moving. Changes within military leadership or strategy could suggest internal reassessment. A shift in presidential communication, more frequent updates, more direct engagement could indicate an effort to rebuild public confidence. Reactions from regional political actors, especially in the north, may reveal how the situation is being interpreted at the grassroots level. These signals do not provide immediate answers, but they offer clues, and in politics, clues often matter more than declarations. Over the longer term, the implications may extend into Nigeria's electoral future. Security has always been a central issue in Nigerian politics, but moments like this have the potential to elevate it even further. It becomes not just one issue among many, but a defining theme, one that shapes voter priorities, campaign strategies, and political alliances. If that happens, the Maiduguri explosion will be remembered not only as a security incident, but as a turning point in political focus. If this development surprises you, drop your thoughts in the comment section. The conversation around this issue is still unfolding, and different perspectives matter. In the end, the story returns to its central question. Is this about security, or is it about global political signaling? The answer is not one or the other. It is both. The explosion in Maiduguri is real. Its impact on communities is immediate and deeply human. It reflects ongoing challenges that Nigeria continues to confront. At the same time, the reaction from global figures, the narratives that follow, and the political interpretations that emerge all shape how that reality is understood, both within Nigeria and beyond. Internal governance and external perception are now tightly connected. They influence each other, they reinforce each other, and sometimes they complicate each other. Nigeria's challenge in this moment goes beyond responding to a single incident. It is about maintaining control of security, of communication, and of narrative. Because in today's world, a country is judged not only by what it does, but by how clearly it is seen to be doing it. And that visibility once lost is not easily regained.